In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we acknowledge and are grateful to live, work, and play in many traditional and unceded territories, covering all of the land of Canada that Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people call home. We are committed to opening up mindful spaces for dialogue, discussion, unlearning, and learning with each and everyone we work with, carried out with intention. Okay, joining me here today from the Chamber Board of Directors is, if you can give us a wave, is First Vice President Stephen Pudwell. Thank you, Stephen. Past President Trevor Anhel. Director Doug Little. Director Peggy Giesen. Director Matt Peterson. There he is. And Director Brenda Mercer. Thank you, Brenda. We're also pleased to have our friend Aaron Fleming, Chair of the Alberta Chamber of Commerce and past president with our local chamber. Thanks for being here, Aaron. We're also pleased to have Cypress Medicine Hat MLA Justin Wright, Mayor for the City of Medicine Hat Lindsay Clark, Cypress County Reeve Dan Hamilton. We have City of Medicine Hat councillors Darren Hirsch, Shyla Sharps, and Andy McGrogan. We have Cypress County councillors Richard Oster and Lloyd Wantz. We're also pleased to have Jim Horsman here, past Chamber President in 1972, and also served with the Legislative Assembly of Alberta from 1975 to 1993, including terms of Minister of Advanced Education and Manpower, Minister of Federal and Intergovernmental Affairs, Attorney General, Provincial Secretary, Government House Leader, and Deputy Premier. Thanks for being here, Jim. And of course, a special thanks to Premier Smith for providing this opportunity today. Okay, we're also pleased to announce, as per the Chamber's boundary changes, as of last week, April 22nd, our Chamber received a letter from Her Excellency, the Governor General and Council, approving our change of name from the Medicine Hat District Chamber of Commerce to the Southeast Alberta Chamber of Commerce. So watch for those changes upcoming in the future. Okay. All right, just a couple notes for today's event. On your tables, you have table toppers with information about membership, upcoming events, and an event survey for today's event. If you have any questions about the Chamber or any upcoming events, we have our team working with us here today. Where's the team? All over the place. Find a team member, and if you don't have time to find a team member, you can always reach out to the office. We've also provided opportunity for registrants of today's event to submit questions in advance of our question and answer period, and we hope to get to those through an armchair discussion following the formal presentation. We also encourage you to share your insights about today's event on social media. Tag us at SE_chamber using the hashtag MedHatPoly and hashtag ABPoly. We kindly also ask that you leave your lanyards and name badges on your table at the conclusion of today's event, because those will be used in the future. Thank you. We will start today's buffet lunch, followed by a presentation from Premier Smith, and we will invite our VIP tables with reserved seating to start our lunch, and our staff will progress through the room to invite the tables to the buffet. So when you're going to the buffet, please exit through the doors on the right and come back in through the doors on the left. As leader of the governing United Conservative Party, she was sworn in as the 19th Premier of Alberta on October 11, 2022. Ms. Smith has a lifelong interest in Alberta public policy and finding the right balance between free enterprise, individual freedom, and role of government. She was previously MLA for Highwood and leader of the official opposition. Before re-entering politics, Ms. Smith worked extensively in media and business, including as president of the Alberta Enterprise Group and radio host with Chorus Entertainment. Danielle Smith holds degrees in both economics and English from the University of Calgary. She's married to David and proud stepmom to his son. Welcome, Premier Smith.
You know,
It's an honor to have you here.
thank you.
Take it away.
You bet.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Steve, so much for that kind introduction. And thank you, Steve, who'll be asking me questions later. I'm glad everybody at the Chamber's named Steve. It'll make it really easy for me to remember everyone, except for, of course, Mr. Horsman. And it's been just a delight to connect with him. When I got involved in politics initially, I remember reading his name a lot in the newspaper. And he reminded me that he was in my job as the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister all the way through the Constitution signing, through trying to amend it with Meech Lake, through trying to amend it once again with Charlottetown. So I told him that we should meet because we might just be back into constitutional wrangling before we know it, based on if the federal government keeps going this way. But let me frame out a few of the comments that I have, and then I'll look forward to getting the questions a little bit later. And I do want to thank you once again for the invitation to join you today. The Medicine Hat Chamber has always been so gracious in offering me an opportunity to talk to all of you and to get feedback from you. And so I'm very pleased to be able to do that. I should also mention how much I appreciate chambers of commerce, because they are policy generators, ideas generators, and they also do so much for the economy. You're valuable partners to local businesses and to governments at every level. You ensure that we're all on the same page and that the province understands what this region needs to be able to meet your needs. And we'll go on looking to you, as I mentioned, for advice, because we know that we can accomplish so much more when we partner together. I sort of planted a seed with Steve number 2 about a question to ask me about, because it was at a chamber meeting that I heard a frustration of a business owner who wanted to expand his business. He said, you know what, I could double or triple my business if only I had reliable air service between Medicine Hat and Calgary and didn't have to drive every day whenever I wanted to go out of province. So I've given a lot of thought to that. So just letting you know, if anyone is interested in my answer, I'll leave it to Steve to ask me it. But I do also know that together, it's our job to make sure that Medicine Hat's economy keeps on growing. And we want to continue to work with municipalities and private enterprise to drive job creation and investment. We want to ensure that Southern Alberta's fantastic quality of life, and it is a fantastic quality of life, that it gets even better. And we want to ensure that the whole province can thrive by developing its resources responsibly. So these are our goals: better public services, a stronger economy, and the freedom to make the most of the opportunities that this province offers. And I'll start with public services, specifically healthcare, because nothing is more important to your quality of life. The old system just frankly wasn't working for anyone. It wasn't working for families, it wasn't working for patients, and it wasn't working for frontline staff. It was leading to long waits for even basic treatment and high rates of burnout for frontline professionals. And so our solution starts with refocusing the healthcare system to help Albertans get the care they need when and where they need it, and importantly, in the right place. So what we're doing with the refocusing is establishing 4 different streams of dedicated focus to service delivery, so that we're able to give better policy direction and measure better outcomes. So when you think of AHS, think of Alberta Hospital Services. AHS should be the very, very best in delivering acute care, delivering emergent care when you go to the emergency room, and delivering surgical care, either on an emergent basis or if you have a scheduled surgery. That should be their number one obsession and main function. We need to make sure that we get down to having 0 waiting lists. And by that, I mean no one should be waiting longer than medically recommended for the required care that we need. So that's what we're doing with our acute care focus. AHS is one of our service providers. So is Covenant Health. So are Chartered Surgical Centers. And there are going to be many others who are able to provide this service as we go forward with more procurement. The other part, and we're still working out exactly how to do this, is we're calling it our sort of continuing care structure. One of the things we discovered that is creating problems in our acute care facilities is we have people who should be in alternative levels of care. And what does that mean? Well, We've got people who should be in a long-term care facility or an assisted living facility. We've got people who should be in mental health facilities or addiction treatment facilities. We've got some people who could be at home with appropriate home care support, and if we renovated their houses. We also have people who are low income, who would otherwise be homeless. We have, at last count, 1,527 people in our acute care beds who should be in an alternative level of care. And we only have 6,400 acute care beds for adults. So that gives you an idea of just how large the problem is. So this is why we're going to be developing a continuing care and assisted living approach, so that we're building more of those types of facilities, so that when a patient becomes stabilized and then needs to go into a care facility where they get that extra support, that there's a place for them to go. So that's the second element of our plan. The third element of our plan is, of course, getting access to a primary care provider, because they are the foundation of our system. Because, of course, if you don't have a family practitioner, where do you go? And if it's in the evening or on the weekend and your doctor is closed, where do you go? You go to an emergency room. So this is part of why we need to make sure every single patient is attached to a primary care provider. And including here in Medicine Hat, not everyone has the primary care provider that they need. I went and visited HealthWorks yesterday, and I mentioned that because with their 9 doctors there, they are able to serve 15,000 patients in Medicine Hat. So there's a goodly portion of this room that is served by that one clinic. But we also heard from them loud and clear about how the rising cost of everything is putting pressure on them. So we're making changes in order to hire and keep more family doctors, as well as rural generalists, because many of those doctors also do double duty at the hospital, and we want to make sure that we retain them. We're changing the health compensation model to recognize their extensive training and experience in leadership, and to ensure that their patients can rely on the lifelong care that they need. We've also created, as a supplemental, a nurse practitioner program that will enable nurse practitioners to open up their own clinics and practice independently in existing primary care clinics, offering services that reflect their training and their skills and their experience. So I know I learned this many years ago, but a lot of people are unfamiliar with the term nurse practitioner. They think it's a licensed practical nurse, and licensed practical nurses, they absolutely play an important role in the system, but they're not as trained to the same level as a nurse practitioner. So you've got licensed practical nurses, RNs, and then with additional training, you've got somebody who can become a nurse practitioner who can do about 80% of the work that we already ask our primary care doctors to do. So that's part of the reason we're creating this specialized stream. And we already have heard that there's about 50 nurse practitioners that are interested in starting along this model. So we're very excited and hope that we'll be able to use that to fill the gap all over the province. The as I mentioned, nurse practitioners are important primary care providers who can offer almost all the same services as doctors. And I believe they're going to be a strong part of our healthcare solution. Now, another recent change that we've announced is the creation of Recovery Alberta, a new health organization focused specifically on mental health and addiction challenges facing so many Albertans. And I'm so pleased that MLA Justin Wright is here. This is an area of personal passion for him. We had a recovery summit at the Esplanade Arts and Heritage Center yesterday to celebrate their achievements and the successes in the community, and also share best practices with each other. Now, I know we still have a lot of work to do, but I believe we're on the right track. And I think when MLA Wright started this, there were about 8 different organizations that came to the first one. Yesterday, I think it was 35. So, and what was so interesting is to hear them say, I didn't even realize that all of these services existed, and the partnerships that are being created out of that are extraordinary. I got a chance to sit with the chief, and he mentioned that the new peace teams are going out, visiting encampments, offering services. And so that's I think the starting point of what can turn into a very successful model. Because I have to tell you, generally speaking, as you know, as a government, we are all determined to ensure that no Albertan is left behind when it comes to their healthcare needs, and Albertans of all ages will get the healthcare that they deserve from the professionals that they can trust. I have much more I can say about the approach that we've taken in Edmonton in clearing encampments and attaching people to the care that they need. I might just say this because it's a model that I think we want to roll out in other communities. And in this community, we'll probably roll it out with the benefit of having those strong social agencies helping to lead it. But what we discovered in Edmonton was that there were just too many points of failure in the system when someone was trying to get services. So you had to go one place to get your ID, and you couldn't get it immediately. You had to come back 6 weeks later in order to be able to pick it up. You had to go a different place if you wanted to get the virtual opioid dependency program and get on Suboxone or Sublocade as an alternative to opioids. You had to go to a different door if you wanted to get any kind of housing support, whether it was shelter or whether it was transitional housing or whether it was long-term assisted housing. And you had to go again to a different door if you wanted to get income supports. And then on top of that, you've got healthcare needs that are unique and different. And if you don't have ID, you can't get healthcare. So what we did, working with the city of Edmonton, is we expanded shelter space so that when the encampments were cleared, there was always a place for someone to go. We increased the number of shelter beds up to 1,800, and they've only ever been about 1,400 people in them. So we have excess capacity in our shelter space. That's the way the courts allowed us to clear off the encampments. But then we took by bus anyone who wanted to go to the navigation center to get help. We took them by bus, and then they worked through the different stations. And one of the results is that we have now had 900 people in Edmonton come through our program in 3 months and get attached to 3,000 different services. And what you will see if you go to Edmonton for an Oilers game, woohoo, Oilers, thank heavens we got another round to go at least, you will see that the areas of encampments have now been cleared and they've stayed clear. They cleared off over 700 encampments, and they were dangerous, dangerous places. Gangs and organized crime were stashing weapons, stashing drugs, threatening people who were in them. We heard of a story of a young girl who was being trafficked there. They were lighting tents on fire if people didn't pay protection money. People were getting burned to death, quite literally. These are not camps. These are not tents. These are dangerous, dangerous places. And that's why we feel so strongly that ultimately we need communities that don't have these encampments at all. And I think we've got a model in Edmonton, and I want to work with the local community to see if we can get the same thing here. Because healthy families are the foundation of healthy communities, and a healthy economy supports both of them. A strong economy helps to create these opportunities all across the province, including here in southern Alberta. We've already instituted the lowest taxes in the country, and we've reduced the red tape burden on businesses by 1/3, saving Albertans and Alberta job creators more than $2.7 billion. And Medicine Hat is seeing the upside. I feel like I have to let you know how well you're doing, because every time I come down here, everybody still feels like the rest of the province is booming and Medicine Hat is not booming to the same extent. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing that employment has increased by over 4 times the provincial average in 2023. New business starts were up 26% last year compared to 2022. With the support from the province's Investment and Growth Fund, Medicine Hat landed a major investment this past October from the S3 Group. S3 Group is going to be building new agriculture equipment, manufacturing, which will lead to 100 permanent jobs. You also have an incredible growth in an aerospace and defense industry here with the unmanned aerial vehicles. Every time I come down, Justin has arranged some amazing tour, whether it's landing zones, which has already defense contracts, but they're using drones as well and trying to offer an alternative to weather balloons, or Avro, which is going to be launching a rocket into space and competing, I guess, with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Like, that's happening right here. It is so exciting. And there's even more, especially because we're going to be making sure that we look further ahead to improve this access to the city and the region. Did I mention I'd love a question about better air service, as well as plan for the future? We're doing this through a grant to help the municipality create a strategic plan for Medicine Hat's regional airport, and by twinning capacity on Highway 3 between Taber and Burdett to increase capacity on one of the region's major routes. You've probably seen we announced that there's 8 different pieces of that project that we want to do, and I can tell you MLA Wright and I are pushing very, very hard to get the Medicine Hat leg prioritized as the next step. We're investing in irrigation to ensure farmers and ranchers and communities have reliable water sources. And we do know that drought poses a real threat to southern Alberta, not just to agriculture, but to businesses and communities. So every time I come down, you see that I bring the snow and rain with me. I don't think I've come down here at all without there being snow on the road. So every time we see that, we are celebrating. To head off the danger as well, we recently finalized the largest water sharing agreements in Alberta history. And I'm pleased to say that 4 agreements are now in place, covering 90% of water allocated in the Bow and the Oldman Basins, as well as 70% of the Red Deer River Basin. And under the agreements, and it's important too when you're downstream of large operations, right? Because you want to make sure that nobody is taking all the water and then you're the ones left without because of first in time, first in right. So we're making sure that under the agreement's terms, major water users have agreed to reduce water consumption if severe drought conditions develop this summer. Those users include municipalities, industries, and irrigation districts. Now, nothing is set in stone. The agreements are designed to be flexible so they can be adjusted in response to conditions. In fact, I just got an update this morning from my environment minister, and she said now with so much snow on the mountain, we'll be measuring the final snowpack. Now we have to worry in some areas with water saturation, snowpack melt, and the change to La Nina. We've got to also be prepared that there might be a flooding. So that's kind of the weird world that we're in this hazard season. Could end with fires, drought, flood, take your pick. But I do want to congratulate everyone who signed on to this agreement because our government, even though we facilitated the discussions, these are voluntary arrangements between water users, and our environment minister is very, very reluctant to declare an emergency that would require her to make decisions about how water is allocated. There's certain circumstances you may have seen in the paper yesterday where she would feel like if the voluntary agreements got overwhelmed that she would step in, but that is certainly her last choice, not her first choice. But this is just a testament to our water users being leaders in protecting Alberta's most valuable natural resource. And water is our most valuable natural resource. Wish I could say that Mother Nature is the worst obstacle that Alberta faces, but unfortunately that's not the case. The biggest roadblock to our province's success is opposition we seem to get from Ottawa. Now I want to frame this out because I know it seems like we can't work on anything because I think what happens in the media, having come from there tends to be more of a focus on things that aren't going well rather than things that are going well. So let me start with the positive. So we have worked well with the province. We got a 10-year health agreement, including 4 bilateral agreements to fund areas of mutual priority. That just happened a year ago. We also got an historic childcare deal, and we've had to make modifications to it. And they're working with us to make those modifications to ensure that we're supporting our private sector daycare operators. We also have worked with them on a whole range of investments, whether it was the Dow Chemical Net Zero Petrochemical Project, which will produce carbon neutral plastics, or whether it's Air Products, Net Zero Hydrogen, which will create the foundation for a new hydrogen infrastructure in our province. We worked with them on de Havilland. They actually helped us get to the finish line on that when we had some problems. I worked with my counterpart, Francois-Philippe Champagne, and Matt Jones worked very collaboratively and well with his counterpart, Mary Ng. We also have worked with them at the table. There's going to be a final investment decision made soon on Heidelberg, which will be net zero cement. And if you look at the most traded commodity in the world, number 1 is water, number 2 is cement. That's going to have a huge impact on reducing emissions across the entire construction supply chain. We also have tables where we're talking about how we build out the hydrogen economy, how we might be able to export ammonia. There's great work being done on small modular reactors. Yeah, okay, I can blow the whistle on this one. In fact, my minister of affordability is in Saskatchewan today, announcing an intertie with a small modular reactor deal with Saskatchewan so that we can start bringing power across from Saskatchewan to create some more stability and begin the process of developing a similar model so that we can adopt small modular nuclear here. And we're doing all of this in collaboration with the federal government, not to mention, even though they reluctantly want to build pipelines, they have somehow managed to build 2 of them. The Coastal GasLink line that'll get our natural gas to market and out into the world for a whole variety of uses, as well as TMX, which just opened up to start delivering first oil yesterday. These are going to be extraordinary achievements. So you look at that list and you think, oh, we actually get along pretty well. However, no, the bad. So instead of acknowledging, unfortunately, the value that Alberta offers in supporting our province's oil and natural gas sector, Ottawa puts a lot of hurdles in our place and is obstructing us. There's a long list of misguided federal policies that are making life more difficult. The carbon tax being one, the plastics registry, another, a cap on emissions in oil and gas, a cap on methane emissions as well, the Impact Assessment Act, Bill C-69. I have to tell you, They've also talked about net zero cars by 2035. They've talked about net zero houses by 2030. They relented and stood back from having net zero or a 30% reduction in fertilizer and caps on emissions on fertilizer. Just off the table for now. You better believe that that's probably coming back, looking at how things are going in the rest of the world. Net zero electricity regulations would also impose crippling costs on everyone and leave the province with an unreliable power grid. And then there's Ottawa's habit of providing Alberta with less funding than its provincial neighbors on a per capita basis. So unfortunately, the federal government is neglecting its own responsibilities. They should be focused on mental health and addiction and healthcare, particularly on First Nations. They should be focused on building out more great nation-building infrastructure projects like the ones I just mentioned, expanding our access to the ports, selling our product, and selling Canada internationally. They should be talking about all of these things, and yet they're focused on areas of provincial jurisdiction like school lunch programs, which incidentally we have very good ones here. I think that the root cellar and the school boards are doing a much better job of being able to find the need in the community than the federal government will. So this is part of the reason they need to focus on their stuff so that we can focus on ours. And we have been fighting back. We won a victory on Bill C-69 when the Supreme Court case decided in our favor. We also won on the first round on the plastics registry because plastics are not toxic. Just look around. You'll probably find 100 examples in the room of plastic, and the government and then the court determined it was an overreach as well as unconstitutional. And we've also brought forward the Provincial Priorities Act to shield Albertans from the federal government's interference in our areas of constitutional jurisdiction. Happy to talk more about that. But one of the things that we became very frustrated by is that the federal government, having worked with us collaboratively on so many other things, having signed a province-wide agreement with both Quebec and British Columbia on their Housing Accelerator Fund, came here under the cover of night, secretly kept on announcing things and then leaving. We only have 8 municipalities that have Housing Accelerator funds. Calgary, Edmonton, and 6 small municipalities. They have left out over 300 municipalities, many of which also need to have that support. That's part of the reason why we're saying, no, don't treat us this way. Treat us the same way you treat Quebec. Come to us, negotiate these deals so that we can make sure that the communities are treated fairly and that we're able to identify the areas with most need. So that's part of the reason why we're doing it. Our government believes Albertans are entitled to their fair share of federal funding and to have that funding spent on priorities that matter to them and not be tied down by unreasonable conditions that reflect an ideology that's out of step with Albertans. Just watch what's happening in Calgary. One of the things that the federal government has demanded is major changes to their zoning bylaws. Now, they keep getting mixed stories in the press about whether or not blanket rezoning is the initiative of the city or if it's a requirement of the feds, but they are having 900 people show up at their town hall because they're so angry at this decision being made. But municipalities shouldn't be put in that position where they have to completely overthrow their power to do zoning and land use planning because the federal government is offering a 10 million or 50 million or $100 million. That doesn't make any sense to allow that to happen. And we're going to do everything that we can to ensure that we're treated fairly. So we're standing up to Ottawa's unconstitutional interference. We with clear-eyed realism, we believe, should shape Alberta's and Canada's interests, not wishful thinking. And so I do want to be clear that I don't want to paint a picture of the federal government as the enemy. That's why I started off with all the things that are going well, because it's not how we see things. We do want to work with them on energy, on the economy, on the environment. We want to be partners in building a better Canada and a better Alberta. And we keep on coming to the table in good faith, and we will continue to come to the table in good faith. But they are making it difficult to get things done. Make no mistake. We will keep trying because there is so much at stake, and your success is worth it. We will never stop working to try to protect you as Albertans and you as business owners and to support you. So I know you've got tons of questions, so I would be happy to take them, and I look forward to our chat today. You want me to take this one?
Take it out.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Premier Smith. It's always amazing to hear your perspective, your challenges, the things that you're doing, and what you're doing about them. I know Stephen, number 2, is anxious to question you. So why don't we get started with that?
Oh. Wow. Thanks, chairs up here. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. These questions have been pre-submitted, and we have some from the general public, and then also some chamber-related questions as well. So first one we'll get into is your government recently announced another complete review of the air ambulance program in Alberta. What is the goal of this review, and who will be conducting it? Perhaps most important, what, if any, impact will it have on our local air ambulance, Halo?
I'm just trying to see if Paul is in the room.
He's over there.
Hey, I should maybe get you to answer, because I know you took Minister LaGrange up in the helicopters this week. Look, Paul has been such a great advocate in helping us to understand some of the difficulties that were created and how we established the funding and the dispatch for air ambulance. So STARS, as we know, does the bulk of the ambulance transfers. They're located in Calgary and Edmonton, and they have a huge service area. Halo is essential in being able to provide regional service, and there's a companion program in Fort McMurray called Hero. And I just think because of the size of STARS that it has gotten a disproportionate amount of attention, and some of those other services have been neglected. So I think the minister has committed the funding that we have promised, and it's come through on Halo. That was one of the things I believe she came down for. But we know that we need to have the long-term funding. We also know that we need to figure out dispatch, because the problem that I'm understanding is that sometimes Halo doesn't get called out when they should. That they'll call out ground ambulance first, and then when the ground ambulance shows up, it's, oh yeah, I guess we need a helicopter. That's kind of reverse. You should send a helicopter out first, and then maybe have the ground meet the helicopter where it needs to be if you have to do any further transport. So that's one of the things that I think is affecting the model that they have. In addition, I think there was some other issues of making sure that there was better integration with some of the skilled paramedics so that they could do both, that they could do ground service as well as be available for Halo. So look, we're just trying to be responsive. We know that Halo has unique needs, Hero has unique needs. They're both absolutely essential. And so I think that Minister LaGrange probably had a pretty good experience in Paul's generosity this past week. So if I've answered anything incorrectly, he'll correct me at the end. I'm sure he'll get me before I leave, but he is a great advocate for Halo.
Great. So for Medicine Hat, what do you see the future energy transition and opportunities for maybe diversification in our area? And I shouldn't just Medicine Hat, but Cypress County and surrounding area.
Well, let me start with Medicine Hat, because I was just telling the table that we have a cross-ministry working group that we're putting together, led by Minister Nate Glubish, my Minister of Technology and Innovation. And let me pile on by saying that Francois-Philippe Champagne asked me if how power constrained we were. He knows that we're probably one of the only provinces that isn't power constrained, notwithstanding the problems that we've had. That's really more of a management issue, not a constraint issue, because we've got 2,700 megawatts of power coming on this year. And especially in this area, with integrated power production, electricity production, natural gas, you have the ability to be the lowest cost provider of both electricity and heating in the entire province. So what do you think that might do if you were able to advertise that you're able to build special purpose generation to attract data centers and AI and all of the technology, Bitcoin mining? What happens in other jurisdictions is those are areas that are getting constrained. So if you end up with a constraint on your power grid, is the Bitcoin mining operation that's told you gotta go off grid. Could you imagine if we were doing that with data centers or doing that with AI? So what's happening is that area is looking for places to go where they can have cheap, reliable power. And so I think that is going to be one of the main propositions that you have, in this region in particular to say, hey, pick us, come over here. And I can tell you, because we're seeing, maybe you don't realize how badly constrained the other provinces are. Quebec is at a point where they are now triaging industrial development requests because they don't have enough power to sign long-term power agreements with everyone who wants to do business in Quebec. They don't in British Columbia because of the drought. They also were not able to get the same kind of revenues selling their hydro down to California like they normally do. Manitoba is constrained. Everybody is constrained except for us, because we made the investment a few years ago to get these new power plants on stream, and we know that we have to keep on keeping up with growth. So I would say that that's going to be an extraordinary opportunity for this region. And you already have the high-tech industry here. When you're talking about the UAVs and the aerospace industry that is beginning to grow, it's creating an amazing cluster right next to Suffield, which provides a trading space. So building on that is going to be immense. On top of that, we're trying to support more agri-food processing and development. That's why we're prioritizing the agri-food corridor and Highway 3. And I just met McCain's. They said the biggest investment they've made in their history is taking place with the expansion that they're doing with their potato plant. And there are other companies of a similar nature that want to do more. So we have to make sure that we're building our infrastructure, and then we'll work collaboratively to be able to do that attraction. We're in process. I have to talk to Arno Dirksen about the crop diversification center. We're transferring that into new authority and keeping the money there so that we can start growing that out. In the past, that used to be an incredible center for developing new innovations. I think 54 different varieties of potatoes were developed there. So Grant Hunter, who's my Agri-Food Corridor Parliamentary Secretary, he thinks we should do the same thing with sugar beets. Are there ways that we would be able to use that center to test different products? So those are the immediate things that come to mind. And so that's why I think that there is just nothing but upside for this region. I think there's just so much positive. And I haven't even mentioned, I think CanCarb's in the room, Methanex is in the room. You already have the expertise on how to use hydrogen, how to capture CO2. You've got pore space so that we can bury CO2. And when you can offer that value proposition of being able to do expansion in these areas without increasing the level of emissions, that also acts as an attractor for some of that new technology. I was just mentioning that there's a company in Red Deer, sorry to Methanex, but that is providing methanol to the hydrogen buses in Winnipeg. Because that is their next step on being able to provide a lower carbon product. So I just think that you're going to see more of that opportunity. And we already had the seed of, I think, some pretty amazing and innovative products here that I think, not to mention ammonia and CF. Like we believe that Japan and South Korea and India have an almost unlimited demand for ammonia, because what they're going to do is, rather than just phase out their coal plants, they want to do dual combustion. So add ammonia to their stream so that they can bring their emissions down and create a longer life for that reliable supply of power. Not to mention, when Coastal GasLink is opened up, we're going to be able to have LNG export. Plus, on top of that, we're going to be building out our hydrogen economy. There's Air Products is talking about how they're going to create a network of hydrogen fueling stations. The first one was just in Beaumont. So imagine what will happen then when you all of a sudden have the infrastructure for fueling so that all of your transportation trucks can be switched over to hydrogen. Now we can maybe partner with some of the Japanese companies like Kawasaki who created a combustion engine hydrogen vehicle that you can just sub out. So we can start doing conversions on all of that. And all of that can happen here because we're going to be the center of the hydrogen hub, because we already produce more of it than anyone else. We produce 2.5 million tons of it a year. So I would just say, seize the day. There's just so many amazing opportunities happening here. And it's no wonder that some of those stats I was reading are trending in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. There have been concerns expressed to our local county about the no-go zone introduced by the provincial government in relation to green energy projects. There are numerous major windmill projects, solar panel projects planned in a 35-kilometer radius that the government will be enacting for the no-go zone with windmills, etc. that will not be permitted to be built. Will there be any exemption to these products that could be grandfathered in for projects that were scheduled to apply for their licenses next year, or an appeal process of any kind?
Well, what I would say is that Pembina was wrong in putting out a map that seemed to suggest that there'd be no renewable projects offered anywhere. What our biggest concern is down the strip of the mountains where we have UNESCO heritage sites. We've got our beautiful Banff Park, we've got our beautiful Jasper Park, we've got our beautiful Waterton Park. And quite frankly, there was a proposal to build 50 wind turbines the size of the Calgary Tower right in a migratory pathway for birds, as well, right in front of our beautiful mountainscapes. Those are the kind of things we don't want to see, because we also are trying to double our tourism economy. But there are lots of places in Alberta where you can build solar and you can build wind. The issue that we have is we want to take an agriculture first policy, because I can tell you a few things that I'm watching around the world. There are governments getting sued for putting these installations onto prime agriculture land, and then the agriculture land not being able to be used to produce food later. We want to avoid that. I mean, why not look at the experience internationally and say, can we do this a little bit better? We're putting in massive irrigation infrastructure in southern Alberta. And why would we do that if we're going to prevent us from being able to put pivots because you've got wind turbines and you've got solar panels on prime irrigated agriculture land? So there's some common sense that will come down to this. There's also innovations that are happening where agrivoltaics is becoming another way of installing these installations in a way that allows for both. I've seen cows and goats grazing underneath solar panels. I've also seen solar panels put far enough apart so that when they tilt, you can actually drive a combine through them so that you can continue to grow crops. So we're trying to be creative here, but we have heard more from the opposite in rural Alberta, especially in this area, that it's not just a matter of a private landowner decides they want an installation on their property. When you put up a wind turbine, it impacts your neighbor's ability to do spraying. In the case of Oyen, they built one too close to the runway, so it prevented us from being able to get medevac in, so we had to upgrade the runway. When you put up those installations as well, there's transmission lines that cut all over the place. That impacts your neighbor. And then on top of that, at the end, somebody has to pay to remove them. And while there is an economic case for those solar panels to be recycled, right now they're just being landfilled. So that's one problem. The other problem is these wind turbines have, 850 cubic meters of concrete at their base. And for us to be able to properly reclaim them, it could cost up to $1 million a turbine. And there isn't the same kind of approach that we have in the oil and gas industry, where the current producers pay for the guys who are out of business. If those companies go out of business, it's the landowner who's on the hook for reclaiming that. And we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that there is a plan at the end of life for those to be reclaimed so that the landowners can get their land back. So those are all of the reasons why we knew we needed to be a little bit more thoughtful about it. The other part is, part of the reason we have had 18 near blackouts in our grid, and maybe you don't have the same experience here because you are kind of a bit of an island, but in the rest of the province, there's been 18 near failures in our power grid. It's because when wind and solar, they come on in a rush and they come off in a rush. And I've been to the ISO command center, and you've got 5 guys watching, waiting to see what's going to happen with wind and solar, and then scrambling to try to get gas to come on fast enough. And sometimes there's a mismatch. And when there's a mismatch, houses go without power, and we can't have that. So we've got to create a grid that is based on reliable energy, where we have a certain amount of base load, and then we have a reasonable and sustainable amount of wind and solar coming on stream. There's lots that we have to do, but I think looking at the number of near failures in our power grid over the last couple of years, when we used to get them once every 10 years, that's a sign that something's not working with the way we've built out this grid as we've transitioned away from coal. And those are the things that we're trying to correct, is to get that better balance.
Okay, and we are getting low on time, but I'll throw this one out to you. Is there anything about air service in Medicine Hat that you'd like to talk about?
I wish I'd given some thought to this. So one of the things that unfortunately has happened in the past is that The government used to have government planes, right? And there was an opposition leader who raised a big stink about that. And so they ended up eliminating the government planes. I was that opposition leader. But one of the problems with the government planes was that you can't just have a solution that only works for politicians and doesn't work for the communities. So I know how difficult it is to get around this province because I've driven all around it. And one of the problem, we have the same problem in southern Alberta as we have in northern Alberta. So it is faster to drive to the airport than to face the unreliability of the air service. And even when I'm in Edmonton and want to come down here, it's faster for me to drive down here, which is 5 hours, because it'll take me 6 hours to go by plane because I have to go through Calgary. And so you're all experiencing that. I've experienced that too. It's just as bad in Grand Prairie and Fort McMurray, which I've been to twice. I needed to get between Grand Prairie and Fort McMurray 2 times, and it's faster for me to drive 7 hours than to fly. Because if you're flying from Grand Prairie, you have to come down on a milk run through Calgary and then go back up on a milk run up through Fort McMurray. And that's crazy. These are Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge are going to be centers of growth. And when you have centers of growth, you need to have good air service. So I put this problem to a couple of airline executives. And one of the things they suggested to me was doing a reverse auction. And the way a reverse auction works is, we want you to provide direct service, Calgary to Medicine Hat, Calgary to Edmonton. How many people do you think you could get on that flight to do daily service? And then they would give us a number. Let's say it's 30 passengers a day. Okay, how many passengers do you need guaranteed so that you make money on this route? Okay, we need 20 a day. So what would happen is as the amount of traffic is building up, you would always pay for the difference so that they are at least profitable. And then you ultimately, over time, would start building up that traffic base. And maybe you start with a 12-seater plane, then it goes to a 30, and then it goes to a 60. But that is a model that we would be able to get service not only to Medicine Hat and Lethbridge, to both of our major centers, but also Grand Prairie and Fort McMurray. So Porter Air has started in our province. I've already been in touch with the CEO there to see if they have the ability to be looking at regional service. Not yet. They've got planes on order, but as soon as their planes are delivered, they want to have that conversation. Central Mountain Air, which I gather has served the community before, they're still in operation. Reliable, great service going up to Lacrete is the last time I took them. There's also another service that goes to Whitehorse. I just remember it's run by Joe because it's Joe's airline because they really advertise that. I can't remember what the name of it is, but they also have a regional air service that we could potentially look at. I just don't know who would come forward to offer service on that basis. But I do know that my transportation minister is very keen to build out the runway capacity so that we can be servicing especially our mid-sized cities and major centers. Because if you live between Calgary and Edmonton, and within an hour of any of those of either Calgary, Red Deer, or Edmonton, you've got all the amenities that you need. When you live as remote as we do in Medicine Hat or Grand Prairie or Fort McMurray or Lethbridge, you've got to be self-sufficient. And I think it's our job to try to find a way to bridge this gap. It's so essential because it helps to provide the inventory that you need, the cargo that you need, the business traffic that you need, the tourism traffic that you need, the ability to locate people within a quick jaunt of either Calgary or Edmonton. One of the things that we're seeing with telecommuting is people can work anywhere in the world, but they have to be within an hour of an international airport. Well, as soon as you have direct air flights, you could be able to attract people here who can work from home, work in front of their computer, especially since you're going to be the AI and data center capital of Canada, right? So that I see those things as interlinked, and I see that as really core business of the provincial government. We've got to make sure that we're investing in the infrastructure. Only we can do that. And if anything that I've said today sparks anything in any of this crowd, I'm hoping that you'll be in touch with me or Justin Wright, because one of the things I really value about Medicine Hat is because you've had to be so self-sufficient, you really are the entrepreneurs and innovators in everything from business all the way through to nonprofit. And so I just hope for nothing but great things ahead and working in partnership with you.
Well, great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I guess my big takeaway from that was you are seeing huge opportunity for our region, and our municipalities really need to be ready to take advantage of that opportunity. So again, thank you so much. I do have a couple closing remarks. You can stay. You can stay right there. Stephen, you can stay as well. All we have to say now is that before you go, you can scan the QR code on your table for upcoming events and visit our entertainment or our event calendar online at medicinehatchamber.com. Please also be sure to register for upcoming committee meetings, coffee and conversation, and learn from the experts coming up this month. And scan the QR code to fill out the event survey for today. As always, thank you so much for being here. It means a lot that you come out to these events. Thank you to Premier Smith and MLA Wright. Thanks so much for being here. Have a great afternoon.